Everything you need to know about the winter solstice. 0223 The December solstice happens at the same instant for all of us, everywhere on Earth. This year the solstice occurs on Thursday, December 21st at 16:28 GMT Universal Time. The winter solstice happens every year when the sun reaches its most southerly declination of 23.5 degrees. In other words, when the North Pole is tilted farthest 23.5 degrees away from the sun, delivering the fewest hours of sunlight of the year. Pagans, druids, and revelers celebrate the winter solstice at Stonehenge. The sun is directly overhead of the Tropic of Capricorn in the southern hemisphere during the December solstice and is closer to the horizon than at any other time in the year, meaning shorter days and longer nights. The shortest day of the year lasts for 7 hours 49 minutes and 41 seconds in Britain. This day is 8 hours, 49 minutes shorter than the June solstice. As such, Tuesday, December 20th is the longest night of the year, with the sun not rising until 08:04 GMT on Wednesday morning. The day after the winter solstice marks the beginning of lengthening days, leading up to the summer solstice in June. In the southern hemisphere, the opposite is true. Dawn comes early, and dusk comes late. The sun is high and the shortest noontime shadow of the year happens there. In the southern hemisphere, people will experience their longest day and shortest night. Equinox and solstice explainer graphic. While it more often than not falls on December 21st, the exact time of the solstice varies each year. Sunrise between the stones at Stonehenge on the winter solstice in 1985. Credit Mark Grant. In the northern hemisphere, the winter solstice is the shortest day of the year, because it is tilted away from the sun, and receives the least amount of sunlight on that day. However, the earliest sunset does not occur on the solstice, because of the slight discrepancy between solar time and the clocks we use. The shortest day of the year often falls on December 21st, but the modern calendar of 365 days a year, with an extra day every 4 years, does not correspond exactly to the solar year of 365.2422 days. The solstice can happen on December 20th, 21, 22 or 23, though December 20th or 23 solstices are rare. The last December 23rd solstice was in 1903 and will not happen again until 2303. Is it actually the first day of winter? People gather at Stonehenge in Wiltshire on the winter solstice to witness the sunrise on the shortest day of the year. Credit Ben Brichalpet. The answer might vary depending on who you ask. There are two types of winter: astronomical and meteorological. Astronomical winter typically begins on December 21st, with the winter solstice, and ends on March 19th. Meteorological winter always begins on December 1st and ends on February 28th, February 29th during leap years. While astronomical winters are determined by the Earth's orbit around the Sun, meteorological winters are the 3 calendar months with the lowest average temperatures. The Met Office tend to use the meteorological definition of the seasons. Why do people descend on Stonehenge for the winter solstice? Scores arrive at the prehistoric monument in Wiltshire to mark the shortest day of the year. Why is the site so important? Stonehenge, the prehistoric monument located in Wiltshire, is carry-aligned on a sight line that points to the winter solstice sunset, opposed to New Grange, which points to the winter solstice sunrise, and the Gothic Circle, which is aligned to both the sunset and sunrise. Archaeologists believe it was constructed from 3000 BC to 2000 BC, and it is thought that the winter solstice was actually more important to the people who constructed Stonehenge than the summer solstice. The winter solstice was a time when cattle was slaughtered so the animals would not have to be fed during the winter, and the majority of wine and beer was finally fermented. Thousands visit Stonehenge for winter solstice. 0110 The only other megalithic monuments in the British Isles which clearly align with the sun are New Grange in County Meath, Ireland, and Marsho, situated on mainland Orkney, Scotland. Both famously face the winter solstice sunrise. To celebrate the solstice and the longest night of the year, people began descending on Stonehenge late on Tuesday night. New York solstice street map. In 2009, a crowd wearing traditional costume met at Stonehenge on December 21st morning to mark the rising of the sun on the shortest day of the year. But unfortunately their calculations were slightly out, meaning they had in fact arrived 24 hours prematurely. The 09 solstice fell at exactly 5:47 p.m. that day, and because the sun had already set, the official celebrations should have taken place at sunrise the next day. English Heritage, who managed the ancient site in Wiltshire, decided to open the gates anyway and welcome those who had made a miscalculation. A spokesman for English Heritage said at the time about 300 people turned up a day early. We took pity on them and opened the stone circle so they could celebrate anyway. They were a day early but no doubt had a wonderful time as well. People always assume that because the summer solstice is the June 21st, the winter solstice will be the 21st of December. They should always check because it does change. Druid leader Arthur Pendragon during the winter solstice at Stonehenge in Wiltshire credit PA Pagan leader Arthur Pendragon said it is the most important day of the year for us because it welcomes in the new sun. There were hundreds of people there. If we'd celebrated on the 21st, it would have been the right day but the wrong sun, when the whole point of the occasion is about welcoming in the new sun. Solar noon, the time midway between sunrise and sunset, is when the sun reaches its highest point for the day, but the exact time of solar noon, as measured by Earth's spin, shifts. A clock ticks off exactly 24 hours from one noon to the next, but actual days, as measured by the spin of the Earth, are rarely exactly 24 hours long. If the Earth's spin is measured from one solar noon to the next, then one finds that around the time of the December solstice, the time period between consecutive solar noons is actually 30 seconds longer than 24 hours. Therefore, 2 weeks before the solstice, for example, the sun reaches its noontime position at 11:52 a.m. local standard time. 2 weeks later on the winter solstice, the sun reached that noontime position at 11:59 a.m., 7 minutes later. The later clock time for solar noon also means the later clock time for sunrise and sunset. The result: earlier sunsets before the winter solstice and increasingly later sunrises for a few weeks after the winter solstice. The exact date of earliest sunset varies with latitude, but the sequence is always the same. For the northern hemisphere, the earliest sunset occurs in early December and the latest sunrise happens in early January. This year earliest sunset was on the 13th of December and the latest sunrise on the 31st of December. Winter solstice. Google Doodle credit Google. The term solstice derives from the Latin word solstitium, meaning sun standing still. On this day the sun seems to stand still at the Tropic of Capricorn and then reverses its direction as it reaches its southernmost position as seen from the Earth. Some prefer the more Teutonic term sunturn to describe the event. Howassis, the solstice celebrated around the world. The December solstice marks the turning of the sun as the days slowly get longer. Celebrations of the lighter days to come have been common throughout history, with feasts, festivals and holidays around the December solstice celebrated by cultures across the globe. Saturnalia. The winter solstice festival Saturnalia began on December 17th and lasted for 7 days in ancient Rome. These Saturnalian banquets were held from as far back as around 217 BCE to honor Saturn, the father of the gods. The holiday was celebrated with a sacrifice at the Temple of Saturn, in the Roman Forum, and a public banquet, followed by private gift-giving, continual partying, and a carnival atmosphere that overturned Roman social norms. The festival was characterized as a free-for-all when all discipline and orderly behavior was ignored. Wars were interrupted or postponed, gambling was permitted, slaves were served by their masters and all grudges and quarrels were forgotten. Saturnalia by Antoine Francois Collet. 17,411,823 Musée du Louvre. It was traditional to offer gifts of imitation fruit, a symbol of fertility, dolls symbolic of the custom of human sacrifice, and candles reminiscent of the bonfires traditionally associated with pagan solstice celebrations. The Saturnalia would degenerate into a week-long orgy of debauchery and crime, giving rise to the modern use of the term Saturnalia, meaning a period of unrestrained license and revelry. A mock king was even chosen from a group of slaves or convicts and was allowed to behave as he pleased for 7 days until his eventual ritual execution. The poet Catullus considered it to be the best of days. Feast of Jule. The Feast of Jule, where we get the term Yule from at this time of year, was a pre-Christian festival observed in Scandinavia at the time of the December solstice. People would light fires to symbolize the heat and light of the returning sun, and a Jule or Yule log was brought in and dropped in the hearth as a tribute to Norse god Thor. The Yule log often was an entire tree, chosen and brought into the house with a great ceremony, and sometimes, the largest end of the log would be placed into the fire hearth, while the rest of the tree stuck out into the room. The Yule log is introduced to the proceedings. The log would be lit from the remains of the previous year's log, which had been stored away and often slowly fed into the fire through the 12 days of Christmas. Tradition dictated that the relighting process was carried out by someone with clean hands. The log was burned until nothing but ash remained. The ashes were then collected and either strewn on the fields as fertilizer every night until 12th night, or kept as a charm and or as medicine. A piece of the log was kept as both a token of good luck as kindling for the following year's log. French peasants believed that if the ashes were kept under the bed, they would protect the house against thunder and lightning. The present-day custom of lighting a Yule log at Christmas is believed to have originated in the bonfires associated with the Feast of Jule. Yalda Yalda or Shaba Chela Night of 40 is an Iranian festival celebrated on the longest and darkest night of the year, i.e. the night of the Northern Hemisphere's winter solstice. Every year, on December 21st, Iranians celebrate the arrival of winter, the renewal of the sun and the victory of light over darkness on Yalda night. Ancient Iranians believed that the dawning of each year is marked with the re-emergence or rebirth of the sun, an event which falls on the first day of the month of day in the Iranian calendar, December 21st. On this day, the sun was salvaged from the claws of the devil, which is represented by darkness, and gradually spread its rays all over the world to symbolize the triumph of good over evil. Family members get together most often in the house of the eldest member and stay awake all night long in Yalda. Traditional foods like pomegranate are eaten during Yalda credits. Samanagvami pomegranate, watermelon and dried nuts are served as a tradition, and classic poetry and old mythologies are read in the gathering. It is believed that eating watermelons on the night of Chela will ensure the health and well-being of the individual during the months of summer by protecting him from falling victim to excessive heat or disease. In Khorasan, there is a belief that whoever eats carrots, pears, pomegranates, and green olives will be protected against the harmful bite of insects, especially scorpions. Eating garlic on this night protects one against pains in the joints. Getting a Hafiz reading from the book of great Persian poet Shamsuddin Muhammad Hafiz Shirazi is also practiced. Another custom performed in certain parts of Iran on the night of Chela involves young engaged couples. The men send an edible arrangement containing 7 kinds of fruits and a variety of gifts to their fiancés on this night. In some areas, the girl and her family return the favor by sending gifts back for the young man. Central Asian countries such as Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan and some Caucasian states such as Azerbaijan and Armenia share the same tradition as well and celebrate Yalda night annually at this time of the year. Santo Tomas in Guatemala, December 21st, and St. Thomas Day in the Christian calendar. In Guatemala on this day, Mayan Indians indulge in the ritual known as the Pala Volador, or flying pole dance. 3 men climb on top of a 50-foot pole as one of them beats a drum and plays a flute. The other 2 men wind a rope attached to the pole around 1 foot and jump. Mayan Indians take part in the Pala Volador in Guatemala. Credit Alamy if they land on their feet. It is believed that the sun god will be pleased and that the days will start getting longer. The ancient Incas celebrated a special festival to honor the sun god at the time of the December solstice. In the 16th century, ceremonies were banned by the Roman Catholics in their bid to convert the Inca people to Christianity. A local group of Quechua Indians in Cusco, Peru, revived the festival in the 1950s. It is now a major festival that begins in Cusco and proceeds to an ancient amphitheater a few miles away.